Hello and good evening, and we are back at the third part of my series about building a retro 286 computer. Last time we got a bit stuck. I have made some advances and hit some other problems. So first of all, I switched to a new mainboard which has an actual proper CMOS setup program built in, so I can actually set up the correct time, that I have a floppy drive and no hard drive yet, but we will talk about that later, and don't have to mess with any G-setup tool or whatever, and just be able to hopefully boot this machine. And let's see what it actually does. It's also a 286 board with 1 MB of RAM, as you can see in the upper right corner. Excuse the video quality here, I had to film this with my phone in front of the screen because the frame grabber actually just arrived today and I didn't have time to set it up properly and test it if it even works. So hopefully the next videos with screen grabs will be of much higher quality, as good as the analog VGA output of the 286 will allow, hopefully. Okay, so let's get this thing booted. I haven't hooked up much, as I said, only the floppy drive emulator, which takes a USB stick. It's a Gotek floppy drive emulator, and as you can see here very quickly, we have a 512K VGA card and 1 MB of RAM, as I said, and it's actually pretty slow. You can abort this RAM test, but I just leave it running here so you see how slow boot process was actually back then. I haven't even hooked up a PC speaker, so we won't hear any beeps or anything. This will also follow. Okay, here MS-DOS is starting to boot without actually giving any kind of visual feedback. But here's already HIMEM being loaded, and here we are at the DOS prompt. That's it. So what we can do now is type in dir to get a directory listing, and yeah, this is basically a simple DOS boot disk, and I installed a nice little game here on this floppy disk because I don't have a hard disk. And this game is called Maniac Mansion. It's one of the first adventure games that came out on the PC. I think it's the very first by LucasArts, or back then they were still called Lucasfilm games. And they basically set the standard for point-and-click adventures. And it's so small, roughly 600 kilobytes, that it fits onto the DOS boot disk quite neatly. So yeah, here we are in glorious 16-color EGA graphics. So we can't even use the VGA card to our full potential. We pick 3 characters at random here. We won't really play the game, just show that it works and that this machine is already capable of playing a few old games. So the floppy emulator, of course, is pretty slow because still, even though it's using a flash USB stick, you get, well, the transfer speeds of a floppy basically, because the port on the controller is actually pretty slow. Yeah, as you can see, nice smooth scrolling, nice animation sequence for the intro of the adventure. Lucasfilm Games production. And usually there would be some nice PC speaker sounds here, so I definitely have to solder some wires to attach a proper PC speaker here, so next time we can listen to something. Yeah, Maniac Mansion is so old that it basically just supports CGA 4-color graphics or this 16 colors EGA graphics. There's no proper VGA graphics, no nice colors, only those very bright EGA colors, which have their charm, I guess. Of course, no only text for the dialogue, no voice output or something as you would have in later CD-ROM based games. But still, also I don't have a mouse yet. I have serial ports on the multi-IO card, but I actually don't have a serial mouse. If someone has one or knows where to get one cheap, working condition obviously, I'm more than glad if you can point me to the right direction. yeah, so let's see if we can get this game started. Just testing it out for a minute or two, and then I will go back to explain to you what I actually had to do to get this running. You see, loading in between screens is very slow due to the floppy. So next step will be to actually get a hard disk running. But so far I only got hard disk errors from one of the multi-IO cards I had, and yeah, that the drive C was not ready. And I think that, what can we do here? I think we can push the doorbell. We can probably push the doorbell, which is, I think, over here. Yes, let's do it. Something will happen in the background. So basically, I think my flash card is too big. I have a 16GB compact flash card, and I think the BIOS doesn't like it. So there's some alternatives that I can do. So I now just ordered a very cheap 1GB card off of eBay, because they are now so rare that you practically can't buy them new anymore. Yeah. So that's about it for today, I think. In the next video I will tell you a bit more about the setup, and hopefully I will be able to boot from the hard disk. And when we have that running, we can... Oh, look at it. We can't open the grating. Yeah, I think I'll be playing this a bit more. But hopefully next time I will have the hard disk up and running, and then we have basically a complete system, and we can start on putting together the... Ah, look, here comes our friendly host. Yeah, hopefully then we will have time to solder together the adlib card, install some games on the hard disk, and have everything nice and fine. And then comes maybe some fine-tuning, adding a mouse, optimizing all the stuff. Yeah, so this is the board that we actually saw boot in the first part of the video. And the reason for switching is actually that I could boot from a floppy on the old board, but I had trouble setting up the hard disk and everything, and yeah, it was way older, and it's still maybe a nice project to set up the other board, but this is so much simpler. It's a very similar board with an Intel chip here in a slightly different packaging, and the key component here is the CMOS setup program over here, which allows me to set up all the parameters for the board even without a floppy disk or controller or anything. Also, I switched to a different floppy controller because the built-in controller on the other board was fine. I could boot from that, but my multi-IO card that I had probably has some problems, maybe wrong jumper settings. And this one here actually has a working floppy port here, but it didn't come with any jumpers, so I had to use jumper wires to do all the settings. But I also ordered like a pack of 50 jumpers off of eBay, which is only a few, I think, few euros including shipping. And I can replace this ugly mess with something better later. This board still has the DIP sockets for the RAM, has the ROM here, the BIOS, and everything is still pretty old. There are newer boards with SIM sockets, etc., but this will work just fine. So the floppy port here is working. The hard disk port probably works, but I couldn't get it to work so far, and I'm suspecting the compact flash disk. But for the first part, this is okay. So what I'm using as a floppy here is actually this nice little device. Let's get the board out of the way. Oh, one more thing that's interesting is that I actually made a proper little power switch here, which attaches to the ATX adapter, and you can actually power it off and on, and this is not mains voltage here, so that is pretty safe as well. Okay, so let's take a look at the floppy disk. Interesting to note is that a PC floppy disk drive comes with a weird cable. There's one end here, this end here that goes to the floppy controller, and there's a red line marking pin 1. Then you get 2 connectors here. This one here with the holes for pins is for 3.5-inch floppies, and this edge connector style here is for 5.25-inch floppies. And normally you would have another 5.25-inch edge connector here, but this is a more modern version where it's missing. And there's another 3.5-inch connector here with a twist. This twist is so that you can actually connect drive A here and drive B will be after the twist. So basically you just attach this connector here, put some power from the oops, that's not the correct one. I take a power connector, it's a 3.5-inch connector, attach it as well. That's that. Let me refocus here onto this here. The Gotek floppy emulators have a display here which tells you which floppy of the roughly 100 that fit onto a USB stick you are currently selecting. Those 2 buttons are for selecting the floppies, and here goes your USB flash drive. You can mount those sticks then on your PC or Mac or whatever and put data on there. That's how I did it, or you can just dump a disk image there. This how to do this will be a whole other video, because it's quite a bit tricky using the software, and even that comes with this thing, because it's pretty crappy. And even without the software you have to do a little bit of hacks. Yeah, I will explain that in a later video. Anyway, this works reasonably well. You don't have to mess around with real floppies, which are tight as well, which works, but this is much more convenient anyway. So yeah, this is pretty neat. Next step will be trying to get the hard disk running, as I said, because when we have that, we are pretty much good to go and anything is possible. So that will be the next phase of the project. For today, I think this is it. I hope you liked it. I hope you join me next time, and you can share, like and subscribe, and otherwise have a nice evening.